When
Any second.
we are now live
right now.
Yeah, we are live now.
Okay. Well, hold on, everybody. Oh, wait, I can see it. It's very confusing sometimes, as we know, if you've been watching. Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Leigh Daniel, and I'm here today on This Is Not Legal Advice, where we share practical tips for before, during, and after the divorce with my co-host, Allison Reiner. Allison and our guest, Appio Hunter. Allison, you want to share a little bit about you and then introduce Appio? Or I can introduce Appio.
Sure. I'm just sharing us out a little bit. So yeah, I'm Ali Reiner. I am your Loved Again coach, and I need to switch my phone off or else I'm going to be talking twice. I work mostly with women who are making a decision on whether they want to stay married or not, and help them navigate the emotional minefield that entails, so that whichever the decision is, they're fully emotionally ready, which actually works out quite well. They're fully emotionally ready for whatever step they're going to take next, which leads me rather nicely into introducing today's guest, Appio Hunter. He's going to be sharing with us all his wealth of knowledge on emotional intelligence and how we can actually put that to use in our relationships in general, but more especially when the relationship gets hard, gets tough, and we're not really sure what the right next move is. So do you want to introduce yourself, Appio?
For sure. It's really good to be here. My name is Appio Hunter. I'm an author, a speaker, and a spiritual coach is what I like to call it. I'm also the co-host of the Real Men Feel podcast. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Real Men Feel podcast, what it is, it's something that my good friend Andy Grant started and then invited me to join as a co-host a couple of years ago. And the whole purpose behind it is that both of us, working as coaches, realized that in the personal development field, about 80% of our clients and our audiences, if we were speaking or doing workshops, were women. And there were very, very few men out there. And so we both felt very, very strongly that we needed to create a dialogue and a space for for men to be able to be not only fully and completely men, but at the same time, fully and completely human. Because first and foremost, if you take all of the gender labels, everything else out of the picture, we're human beings first. And human beings do have emotions, and it helps to recognize those emotions, and it helps to be able to feel as human beings. And so that's how the whole idea started. We've been going on for a little over 2 years, actually almost 2 years. In February, it will be our 2-year anniversary of the podcast. Along the way, both of us also became weekly columnists for the Good Men Project. So we have been broadening out and linking into other men's movements around the world. And it's been a great experience.
That's great, Appio. And I've known Appio for a long time. I think 5 years probably coming up.
Yes.
Well, that's not long in the scheme of like the whole life, but it's long, relatively long. So I've known him and very close friends with Appio. And one thing that he has shown me again and again is emotional resilience. And he's worked with me when I've had challenges in my own relationships, breaking up. And I like to talk about my own relationships. So, but Appio has a lot to share with us today. And I think that he touched on a point that I know very clearly, is that when men come in my office, they often are really ashamed and embarrassed to show emotion. And I try to encourage them to feel and to accept that this is a very difficult time in their life, and that of course they're going to have emotion, and it's nothing to be ashamed of, and to really appreciate the fact that they have emotions. But I don't really know what emotional intelligence is, though. So you want to fill us in, Appio?
For sure. So basically, emotional intelligence, if you were to talk about it from a scientific perspective, involves 5 main components, which, of course, off the top of my head, since it's so early in the morning, and I actually spent a good portion of the night not feeling well at all. Yeah, I know, it was an interesting evening. But really, one of the main components is self-awareness. And that's probably the component that I focus on the most. When I talk about emotional intelligence, I really like to talk about it from the perspective of a practical application. Oftentimes, when you hear people talking about emotional intelligence and things you can do in order to be emotionally aware, basically be mindful, be observant, being, just all the different steps, what really happens is that they talk about it from almost a detached perspective. There's a lot of clinical language that's used. There's a lot of, oh, well, it's like you just need to do these steps or whatever, but it's almost like a checklist. And even though there are my own steps that I use and there are my own tools that I share, when I work with people and when I talk about emotional intelligence, I like to talk about it from the perspective of how we as human beings can actually connect with it emotionally, how we can actually resonate and feel what it is that we need to feel. And so I approach it from a much more feeling perspective, if you will, a much more, I like to use the term just you can basically emotionally resonate with the steps that I talk about. So it's about the practical everyday application as opposed to a scientific clinical approach of this is what it is, this is what you can do.
Okay. And Allison, do you know that term? Because now I'm going to ask you to tell me what you think it is. Oh, I don't hear your sound.
Oh, she's muted. There you are. Oh, muted again. There you are.
Sorry, here I am.
That just so you wouldn't have to answer.
So I didn't have to answer.
She was out there Googling it.
Yeah, no, but for me, the one expression that I picked up on was self-awareness. And, I think it's something that we're not taught to do. I'm not avoiding answering the question. I'm sort of giving my
just
take.
Kidding.
I'm avoiding answering the question. But, for me, that emotional or the self-awareness is something that we women aren't particularly taught to reach in and touch for. And I know, having, the mother of a son, the wife of a husband, I see how they struggle as well to really sort of name those emotions and really own them and really bring them out. So for me, that self-awareness is the very first stepping stone, if you like, the first point in any formula that gets you to the place that you can actually hold out your emotions, you can name them, and then you know what to do with them. And until you can actually put a name on it, until you can actually sort of give an explanation to it. That's why so many relationships end up in trouble. We use all these generic words. I'm angry. I'm hurt. You don't love me. You don't respect me. All these things, but we don't actually give a meaning to it. So the other person has no idea. They know what it means to them in their minds, and they react to their own perception of what that means, but they don't know what you're talking about. So and you don't actually know. Often with clients, I'll say, can you sit down and write out what that means? When you're angry, what happens? When you're hurt, what are you talking about? What feelings are you feeling? They don't know.
Wow.
I get messages back. We're not taught to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think especially what Allison said, women aren't necessarily taught either, is that we're taught to be emotionally intelligent about everybody else's feelings. How is, especially in a family, I remember when I was growing up and my mother took care of everybody, and she still takes care of everybody. But she, and I, when I got to college and started learning about things about codependence, about all these different things, I said, Mother, I think you're codependent. And she cried, and hopefully she's not watching. I don't think she is. Anyway, and so I think a lot of times women also are conditioned that their own emotions are not important. And so they're certainly not self-aware. They're thinking about how the kids are doing, how their husband's doing, maybe how their parents are doing. And they're not really thinking about what's important to me.
And the other thing, and we do it with the best of intentions. We start at very young. Children, they say, oh, I feel X, Y, and Z. And we bat it off and we say, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. And it's meant from a place of love. But actually what it does is make you think, I shouldn't. Why? What's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me if I'm feeling like this. What do I do with it? Next time it happens, I push it down. I don't admit to it. I don't tell anyone about it because there must be something wrong.
Yeah.
And I hope other people felt like that, because that's how I felt growing up.
Yeah, and what is the second? You said the first is self-awareness?
Sir, yes. So the second part of emotional intelligence is self-regulation. Basically, being able to manage disruptive impulses, being able to be conscientious, being adaptable, and being innovative with regards to managing your emotions. From a practical standpoint, the way I put it is, A, acknowledge how you feel. B, rather than resisting how you feel, allow yourself to feel what you feel. Give yourself full and complete permission to feel fully and completely. And so that allows you to really be able to embrace rather than resist. I mean, we all know that, at least within our circles anyway, that anything that we resist ends up persisting. And, what we focus our attention on expands. So if we're focused our attention on the things that we don't want to feel, well, that don't aspect of it, the subconscious does not accept that word don't. Instead, the subconscious really focuses on what it is that we're, focused on, and it creates more of it. And so it creates this bit of a cycle. And so I'm like, don't resist it. Don't say no to it. Instead, embrace it, feel it. The labels that we attach to our emotions are just that. They are labels.
Right.
Good nor bad. They simply exist, and they help us navigate our lives. They help us to let us know what it is that we're doing. Is it in alignment with the things that we claim that we want, or is it in alignment with, or are we out of alignment? Essentially, it's like that GPS system. It's like, when necessary, or at the earliest opportunity, please make a U-turn or something like that. It does that. It helps guide us, and our emotions. When we learn to, instead of label them and instead learn to embrace them, things become so much different. And our entire perspective, particularly with regards to divorce or relationships or whatever, becomes way, way different. Because then we're like, okay, I'm feeling this. This is telling me this. And maybe I need to, do a quick course correction, or I'm actually on the right track.
And what is, I like to ask Alice some questions just to trigger. No, just to
wake me up.
When he said self-regulation, so the first thing that came to my mind was a case I had many years ago where my client would get angry and he had a gun. Now, nobody got hurt, but he would take his gun out and just shoot it. They lived out in the rural area, and he would just shoot it up in the air. And the judge did not like that. And so I was just thinking about how he did not self-regulate very well. Because is that what you mean by regulation? And Allison, I'm sure that you probably don't have anything. And I remember he had like a long leather jacket, and everybody in the office was terrified. But he really, for some reason, that just was an outlet. Nothing was hurt. But no, he didn't aim it at anybody. It was just, but he shouldn't have done it, because it just kind of was intimidating, right? He had a gun. And, but I'm sure you've seen people who haven't regulated their emotions very well, right, Allison?
Well,
is that what you mean, Appio?
When you said Appio, self-regulate, for me, it kind of goes against everything else you were saying. Because self-regulate, the whole point of what you were putting across was, okay, let me accept exactly what is going on here and now, because the sooner I do, the sooner I can move through it. If I'm self-regulating, the chances are I'm aware that I don't like what I'm feeling, so I might try and push it down. I might try and go and shoot a gun against a wall. I might go and shoot a gun against somebody's head. That's regulating my emotions.
Right.
So I think it's probably just the expression.
No, you're absolutely correct. You're spot on. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like that term self-regulation, and why I even, I'm talking about what is the accepted second component of emotional intelligence. That terminology, self-regulation, I have taken it and redefined it as a full and complete acceptance of everything that one feels, because to me, you can't control anything, but you can certainly work with everything. So self-regulation is more of a level of awareness and being able to, so I'll give you an example. The beautiful landscapes that we see in nature, were they created through regulating nature, through trying to force nature into a particular image that we wanted? Or were those beautiful landscapes created by simply working with what is, by allowing whatever, the wind, the water, whatever it was that sculpted that particular gorgeous landscape, by allowing it to pass through us? Look at what it wound up sculpting. We are no different. We may perceive ourselves as being different, but we are still part of a natural system. And part of that natural system means being able to work with the emotions. So the self-regulation, I think, is an injustice to the actual idea of you can't control anything, but you can work with everything.
And it's like, yeah, and it's going back to what you were saying, accepting the emotions in you, but also accepting the situation and the circumstances that you find yourself in. I'm sure, Leigh, you spend so much time actually trying to talk people down. They're just not accepting what is happening. This is happening. I don't like it, so I'm going to keep fighting against it instead of saying, okay, it's happening. I can't do anything to change it. Can I do anything to change it? No, because it's happening by their hand, not by mine. Therefore, what can I do just to make peace with it?
Right.
So that I can move through, so that I can actually accept what is and find the solution. So I think that's, for me, if I'm thinking emotional intelligence, that's kind of a snapshot of where I would look at it from a woman's perspective.
And I see self-regulation and adaptation. I mean, I definitely can see, because being able to feel it, but also not let it become destructive. And I think that, you said something about, because you could have emotions and you could really act out and do things that could cause harm to yourself or to others. Or, when I see things and I'll say, how would, I understand how you're feeling and why you would do this, like why you would vandalize your ex-husband's car, but that's not something you need to be doing, I mean, I see that kind of thing, not so much now as I did when I was a young lawyer, but I had a client once who stabbed his wife at the visitation exchange. And he called me to tell me that, the visitation exchange hadn't gone well. And I had just found out from the other lawyer that he had stabbed her. And I said, don't you think that it was important that you had stabbed her? I mean, I ended up withdrawing from the case, obviously, but that's silly, right? That's not an appropriate use of your emotions.
Right.
It's not. It's a slight understatement as well. It didn't go well.
He didn't even think to tell me. He didn't even tell me. It was like, oh, the visitation didn't go well. And I'm like, I just found out that you stabbed your ex, and she wasn't seriously injured. I don't know how he stabbed her because that doesn't sound good. But so I, clearly I've seen lots and lots and lots of examples of people who are not regulating. I don't really find I don't find that term that bad. I understand it. I understand it because I've seen a lot of non-regulatory kind of
behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what's next? What's number 3?
So number 3 is motivation. Basically, you can, essentially have the motivation to not only make the necessary adjustments, but you can also take initiative to, for instance, part of the adaptability component and the innovation part of the self-regulation also means having, being able to be flexible with changing situations, and also being open to new ideas, which leads to the motivation. Oftentimes motivation, if we're stuck in the same stories that we keep telling ourselves over and over and over again, we end up getting stuck. And if we can find a way to switch the story, for instance, taking that new idea, being open to all of the emotions and being able to navigate them and work with them as opposed to against them, that allows for a lot of us to release those self-destructive impulses, or wanting to stab folks, shoot guns in the air, or the Carrie Underwood song, about Pete.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Exactly. So all of that leads to being, new thoughts, new ideas, that adaptability, being able to be motivated to make the necessary changes.
Right.
Means,
yeah, and you know, obviously those are pretty severe, but I'll tell you once, this is a ridiculous story too, but my girlfriends once were so mad at a guy I was dating that they went over to my house when I wasn't there and he wasn't there and took all of his clothes and put them out in the yard. I didn't even do it. I just started thinking about, they did it. They packed everything up that he had in the house and just took it and put it out in the yard. And I got home and all of his stuff was there. And so it was, yeah, because, you know, finding ways that are new. So, you know, instead of falling back into the same kind of crying, raging, you know, like I tell people, journal. I say, you know, because to me, that's really helpful to get, because you need to get the emotions out. Just like Allison said, you can't just leave it stuffed in, you know, you need to get it out. But maybe they're not going to be very receptive. And Allison has said before how she tells people just to rage, just to let it out.
Yeah.
Don't use any
not
ideas.
to your, I should say, not to your partner. That's not useful. Find somebody else, a girlfriend, a journal, a wall,
a pillow. You know, in fact, I have a friend who had this thing called the Damn It doll. It was basically this rubber doll that she would get, and she would be like, whack it against the desk and it's like, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. And that's how she got her stuff out, you know?
I think we saw one of those when we were in London.
Yeah, they sell them everywhere. That's a good idea. Good idea.
I thought it was a great idea. Or, you know, there's the rage pillow, where you can just like hit it and throw it against the wall, you know, yell into it, whatever. So
because it's such an important thing, and it's something I talk about, I think, every time I get a chance, is we need to let those emotions out somehow. Yeah. And it's something else. Again, it might just have been how I was brought up, where I was brought up, but we were brought up to, you know, you don't express those. It's bad manners and it's a weakness. But unless you do, you're never going to move through it.
Right.
But at the same, you know, the next thing is, it's only the first step, though. A lot of people let it out and they get stuck in it.
And some other things, you know, that that when I was growing up, that my mother taught was that we eat when we don't feel good. Now, you know, here I am and still carrying on, you know, which causes me to constantly struggle with that idea of, if you feel bad, you should eat. You know, that was her idea of, that's comfort. And so I think that the one that, you know, innovating, finding new ways, that's 3, right? So what's 4, Appio?
Right. So 4 is empathy. And no, that one is pretty self-explanatory. You know,
I've got loads of that.
Here's the part that I think that a lot of people tend to think about when they talk about empathy. Oftentimes, and this is a cultural thing, and in most cases, it's worldwide, regardless of which culture you're referring to. There are nuances based off of culture, but ultimately, worldwide, I have never encountered anyone, when you say the word empathy, they apply the word empathy to themselves. Instead, they apply empathy to other people. And I prefer to say, screw empathy for others, go for understanding instead. But you can still show empathy for yourself. You can still show empathy for the things that you're actually going through.
That's good.
And forgive yourself for being fully and completely human. Part of empathy is forgiveness. So turn it around. Don't do it. Don't apply to others. You know, when you're talking about the external things, understanding is far better and far more powerful. But for yourself, start with the empathy, start with the forgiveness, and then you can move toward understanding. So take the empathy and give it to yourself.
What's that expression? You do the best you can with what you know. When you know better, you do better. It's exactly that, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. I mean, for me, I'm so familiar with looking at everybody else and taking care of everybody else and their emotions. And you know, when it comes to my own, I don't want to feel. Of course, I do, and then I share it with everybody. But you know, I definitely that's really good. I never thought of it. That's amazing. So we're on to 5, Appio.
On to 5. Social skills.
Social skills. Okay.
Social skills, and we're talking social skills such as conflict management, being a change catalyst, being able to collaborate and cooperate with others. That's like the, I guess you could say, the pinnacle of emotional intelligence, is to be able to reach the point where you no longer feel isolated or antisocial or anything like that, but instead you can step out into society. And even if you may be an introvert, you can still embrace the totality of who you are and be able to interact with people in a way that doesn't that doesn't result in some type of outburst or acting out or anything like that. And that's especially true when you are going through an emotionally challenging time, such as a divorce. I mean, divorces are perhaps one of the most emotionally devastating for both men and women times of your life. And being able to reach the point where you are self-aware enough and okay enough with your emotions that you can then have those social skills to be able to interact and navigate the ups and downs of a divorce and everything else without breaking down. That's great. But here's the thing. For me, one of my favorite skills to practice is a skill of being okay. And the reason why I use the terminology being okay as opposed to acceptance is because in Western societies in particular, we have this thing about when you hear, well, just accept what is, the immediate knee-jerk reaction and the emotional resistance is, oh, hell no, because that means I'm going to be giving up, I'm capitulating, and that, blankety, blank, 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 so-and-so deserves all the bad things that, I have planned for him or her or whatever. But if we can instead change the terminology from accepting to instead just being okay, you suddenly give yourself a lot more space to navigate everything. The space of being okay and the practice of being okay means that you can layer being okay in multiple ways. You can be okay with not being okay with a situation and still be okay with moving on.
Okay, wait a minute. You can
right?
be okay with not being okay, and then being okay. I felt like that was a serious, no, I get it. I'm just kidding.
Can I put that into layman's terms for me? Because
I know, when you first hear
it, what you're basically saying is, it's difficult to accept. And especially when people are, that's the most difficult time. Other people are behaving badly and we're told we have to accept their bad behavior to be good with ourselves. Mm-hmm. And you're saying, nah, just the willingness to think about possibly accepting their behavior at some point is enough to buy you enough peace of mind to carry on.
Beautiful summary. That is a beautiful summary. Yes.
There used to be a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay. And that's been probably from, I don't know, the early 90s when I saw that book. And I remember I thought that, I think it's, the guy's name is Thomas something. I'm not going to look it up right now, but I remember that book was really popular. And I think one of the important pieces of emotional intelligence and social skills going through a divorce, both before, during, and after, is how everybody around you is going to treat you. Because we have suddenly families treating you differently. This is a mother-in-law that loved you and suddenly hates you. You have sets of friends that look at you differently, or I have a friend that's in a small town and they're contemplating divorce, and it's like it's spread around the town and people now talk about it. And so how do you interact with those people? That's part of the social skills, right? And the emotion, sure. How you interact with those people, no matter what they think or say about you, you have to, I guess the idea is that you are emotionally resilient, mm-hmm. And that you don't let what everybody else is saying and doing shake you. You know who you are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard the term, everybody's entitled to my opinion? And,
no.
And what I think is none of my business.
I like it.
I haven't heard it, no.
Yeah, so the flip side, so there's, everybody's entitled to my opinion, but then there's the flip side of that is what you think is none of my business.
Yeah.
And I like to use that to kind of put it into the broader context and link it back to the skill of being okay. being okay with yourself and being okay with what other people think means that you can ignore what they think, and you're not going to be focused on what it is that they're thinking.
Right.
And because judgment is going to be part, it's just a thing that humans do. And there are certain societies that are far more judgmental than others. And yeah, exactly. And
you've been to Italy.
Have you been to the Middle East?
I have. I mean, well, actually, I haven't been to the Middle East, but I have many friends from the Middle East. And what's amazing is that once people are removed from the their typical settings, you suddenly realize that people suddenly have more permission to be fully themselves, and they're much less judgmental. They may be shocked, they may be uncomfortable when presented with, ways of doing things that they've never been exposed to before, but they're less judgmental, at least on the surface anyway, because they no longer have to conform to a particular prescribed set of behaviors. And you almost have to treat the divorce process and the judgment and everything else like that. Suddenly you're in a different place, even though you may be physically in the same place. You are in a different space, and it's like what everybody thinks is none of your business. But more so, what you think about yourself is very much your business.
Yeah, and you just have to stay. You just have to kind of stay steady and realize that all that is going to go away. You just have to focus on, and I think that's what emotional intelligence says. No matter what they're saying about you or how they're treating you now, you just need to focus on taking care of yourself, like you said earlier, and not trying to, as each person treats you differently, that shouldn't affect. You're not supposed to say should, are you? Now look what I've just done.
Stop shitting on yourself.
But the other side of that is, it tends only to be the judgment, that strong judgment you have of yourself, that upsets you when you hear it in other people.
Right.
So if you're good with yourself, and it goes back to that, that self-acceptance and self-love, kind of throw it in. I don't think I've used it at all this week. But, when you've got that strong sense of self, your self-worth, as it should be, then other people's judgment bothers you less. Not to say it doesn't bother you at all, because we're human. Right. Of course we're human, and when emotions are running high, anything gets under your skin, but it bothers you less when it's not something that you feel yourself. It's not something you're beating yourself up for. And there are those times, people keep telling, for me, I was always selfish. That was something my mum always said, you're selfish, you're selfish, you're selfish. And I remember the first time somebody said, oh, you're selfish. No, I'm not. And I just had that absolute sense of who I was, and that's not something I am. I'm lots of other things, but that's not it. And I could just let it go. And that's I suppose what we're working for. That's what you're trying to get people to.
I have to add on to that there is something that's called mindful selfishness, and that mindful selfishness is where you can say no to others, so you can say yes to yourself first, but in a way that puts you in the best possible position to share the best aspects of yourself with the world, because then you become purely selfless. Because now you're fully present, fully doing exactly what it is that aligns with what you want to do. And when you are doing that from that space of joyous living, oh my God, there's like nothing, because now you are sharing, you're basically having your own personal party, and everybody's invited. Whether or not they want to come in, that's their business. But you are sharing the best parts of you. That is the most selfless thing you can do. Right.
Yeah. And
that's the expression that I've heard to describe exactly that. And it's beautiful. Self-full. Yeah. I'm overflowing.
Yeah. And that's the thing that people have, say it one more time. I've already forgotten the term.
Mindful selfishness.
Mindful selfishness. Yes. That sounds like a lot of new age, mumbo jumbo.
Kind of, sort of. I did borrow it from mindful, because I struggled for a long time to find it.
No, I like it. I'm just saying, it sounds a little woo, mindful selfishness. That's exactly though what people have to do. When, Allison's on the let's stay together, let's love again, when they have to make that hard decision that nobody else wants them to make, then they know that this is the best decision for me. this is the best decision for me. And this is the only way I'm going to live a happy and fulfilled life, is if I move out of this situation. That takes that mindful selfishness.
Right. And there are 5 tenets of joyous living that I like to live by that I think actually kind of help to lay, rather than going through the clinical explanation, these kind of help to lay a more emotional foundation for joyous living, but also emotional intelligence. And I'll just go through them really quick, share those with with everybody. The first tenet of joyous living that I like to live by is that you're not responsible for anyone else's good feelings but your own. That ties into the mindful selfishness. Make the decisions that make you the greatest joy, and you will discover the freedom to do your greatest good.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. The second tenet of joyous living is your human experience is your ultimate expression of personal joy. And what that boils down to is that you cannot be separated from joy, because joy is an essential part of you as a human being. It is written into your DNA. So just be yourself, live your life, and you will experience joy. You will know joy. But the third tenet is that the expression of joy is as natural as breathing. If you just allow yourself to delight in simple pleasures, and that means going out with a friend, literally smelling the roses, whatever it is that is a simple pleasure for you, drinking coffee in the morning, allow yourself to delight in that. And then joy shows up in extraordinary ways. The fourth tenet is that every emotion you feel is an aspect of joy. This goes back to that first thing that we were talking about. There are no bad or good emotions. There are simply emotions that can guide us. The labels help us make sense of whether we're aligned or not aligned. But at the end of the day, every emotion is an aspect of joy. So if we allow all of them to flow, we'll live a joyous life. And then finally, this is my personal favorite. When you're joyous, the universe celebrates with you. Just rejoice in who you are, and joy will be your constant companion.
Beautiful. Oh.
That's so good. I love it. That's so good. I know this morning I was feeling really super jet lagged, and I just put on some good music and just danced around and teased my dogs with chicken and rice.
Well, better than me, because I spent a very miserable night. Something I don't know.
Tell us.
Yeah, don't have to go into details, but I was actually planning to juice on the car on my way to the office, and I'm at home.
Too much information.
Yeah, I'm stopping you there.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't while you're ahead.
That's just exactly. And I'm just doing this from home instead. I was going to be in the car, but
no, that's fine. I know. I almost had to, because I couldn't find my car keys, as I told you guys. Anyway, that also is not important to our listeners. So thank you, everybody. Where can we find you, Appio, and you, Allison?
So my website is appiohunter.com. It's APPIO hunter.com. And a lot of all information about me, my work, what I do, and so forth can all be found there.
Allison?
You can find me on my website, AllisonReiner.com. That's ALLISON. Project Positive Change, every Monday at 3 o'clock, sharing tips on relationships, how to stay together. Or you can come and join my Facebook group, which is Loved Again and Forever.
And I'm Leigh Daniel, and you can find me at Project Positive Change, or right here in Huntsville, Alabama. So thank you so much, Appio. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate you very much. And next week, who are we going to have, Allison?
Next week, we've got Dr. Stem.
We got Dr. Stem next week, and she's going to be talking about what?
She's talking, I believe she's talking about children. Again, we're going back to children within relationships. I'm still waiting for the bio to come through. So that should be good, because they are the most important part of any divorce.
Yeah. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care. Bye.
See you guys.